Insert coin.
Hi, boys and girls. Welcome to explaining all of the Pac-Man ghosts throughout all of Pac-Tory. This is part 6. I am SuperPat98, and thank you so much for all you guys for watching my Pac-Man ghost analysis videos for all this time. I'm going to try to get to every single Pac-Man ghost I can possibly find. And like I said in other videos, they are a little difficult to find sometimes because they are ghosts. If you're new to these videos, this is a video series where I check out every single Pac-Man ghost throughout all of the history of Pac-Man. Whether it's the cartoons, from commercials of Pac-Man, the video games of Pac-Man, the comics of Pac-Man, of whatever. So without further ado, let's get started. Number 1, Spectre. Spectre is a spy ghost from the cartoon Pac-Man and the Ghostly Adventures. He appeared in the episode The Spy Who Slimed Me. I think he's a really interesting ghost, and I'm a huge James Bond fan. He is basically a parody of James Bond as a Pac-Man ghost. He has a tuxedo, and maybe when he used to be alive, he was basically James Bond. He looks like he's drinking out of a martini glass in the episode, and he says, "I preferred steered, not steamed," which is a reference to James Bond's classic line, "I preferred it shaken, not stirred." His name is perfect as a parody of James Bond because it's a take on the James Bond evil organization Spectre. It's just spelled a little bit differently because, he's a ghost in this show. And this episode aired in 2013. And in 2012, the Bond movie Skyfall came out. Two Daniel Craig James Bond movies mentioned the organization Spectre throughout those movies, and it was building up to 2015's Bond movie Spectre. So it's really cool this episode came out a year after Skyfall, because in 2012 it was like the 50th anniversary of James Bond, and Skyfall was a huge hit. So 1 year later, the fact that they have a James Bond ghost in the Pac-Man cartoon, that is awesome. It's all from that same era, so that makes it even cooler that Spectre came out in the show during that time. He is a lightning ghost, which is a very specific kind of ghost where he has lightning powers. What's really fascinating about Pac-Man and the Ghostly Adventures is that there's all these different types of ghosts. They're not just normal ghosts. I mean, some of them are, but some of them have like specific powers like fire or ice or lightning. So watching this show, I would say that Spectre is the most infamous lightning ghost of all of them. I have to assume the people who wrote this episode have to be James Bond fans, which I think is awesome because I'm a big James Bond fan and I'm a big Pac-Man fan. So this episode to me is one of the best episodes in the whole series. I think Spectre could come back in another episode if they bring the show back, or in another Pac-Man game. Now, the only difference between him and James Bond is that James Bond is good and Spectre is bad. Other than that, they're both pretty much secret agents. And in the episode, the Ghost Spectre acts like a secret agent. Like he has like espionage, and he secretly tries to get plans and stuff. Due to his tuxedo and his mysterious nature, we can assume that when he was alive, he was a spy, or basically James Bond, I guess. It's kind of funny. I mean, you can almost think of it as if it was it's the ghost of James Bond, and then when James Bond dies and becomes a ghost, James Bond becomes bad. And then he becomes the Ghost Spectre. It's kind of like the ghost Ogle that I mentioned in part 5, how he used to be a Pac, and he used to have his own restaurant, and he used to be a decent person probably. Then when he became a ghost, then he owns a restaurant in the Netherworld, and now he's bad as a ghost. What's interesting is that I guess people in real life, if there's something about them that's not good, then if they become a ghost, then if they go to the Netherworld, then we can assume that they become worse people in the Netherworld because they weren't good enough people in real life to go somewhere else when they die, and instead of going to the Netherworld, they go somewhere else, like heaven or something. And James Bond, his morality, the character of James Bond, was always in question throughout all the films. He is a character that does some dark things throughout the movies, but he's a good guy for the most part. So he is almost an anti-hero, James Bond, because he's kind of like Batman. Like, he's really interesting as a character. And that's a fascinating question in and of itself, is like, is James Bond a good person? And if we go deep into the character, maybe he's not always a good person. But for the most part he is. But the fact that he has some dark stuff about him as a character, James Bond, Can we assume that's why he becomes a worser person as a ghost when he becomes Spectre in Pac-Man and the Ghostly Adventures? I don't know. Plus, for all of you who haven't seen the movie Skyfall, at the very beginning, James Bond gets shot, and then his body falls into the ocean. And the opening title sequence shows a graves. The film makes you think James Bond is dead right from the beginning of the movie. Because before Skyfall came out, there were all these rumors that they were going to kill off James Bond. I think that's really cool that a year after Skyfall came out, they had this episode, The Spy Who Slimed Me, where they have a James Bond ghost in the Pac-Man cartoon. Because in Skyfall, they have a scene where they make it seem like James Bond is dead. And now the writers of the show took that idea, the inspiration of James Bond being dead as a ghost, and made it a character, a ghost in Pac-Man. I just love the whole concept. It's just so badass. And for those of you out there watching this video who aren't James Bond fans, the title of the episode, The Spy Who Slimed Me, is a parody of the old 70s Bond movie, The Spy Who Loved Me. Anyway, moving on. Number 2, Biru. Biru is a ghost villain from the DS game Pac-Pix. I just really like his design. He looks like a Pokemon. He reminds me of Wobbuffet from Pokemon or Lickitung. And there's not much to say about him, but he has a really classic, I don't know, almost 90s-esque cartoon-style look about his design to me. And he also kind of looks like a Boo from Super Mario Brothers. I can see him being a ghost in like Luigi's Mansion or something. He seems to fit quite well in that group, at least from a visual perspective. I wish there was more to say about his character, but I think he looks like a traditional ghost with just like an enormous tongue. I would say that they were trying to have a classic design ghost. Biru is one of the ghosts created by the Ghost Ink. The Ghost Ink is very mysterious. It's vaguely explained in the game. It just makes you wonder, how does one possess Ghost Ink anyway? And how could it be used to create ghosts? I'm not sure how much it makes sense because they're ghosts, right? But then again, ghosts can control objects, right? And they can go through things. So I guess something about it does make sense, the whole thing with the Ghost Ink. Still, the whole game of Pac-Pix, the whole concept of the Ghost Ink is very creative, and it allows them to create all kinds of really more interesting ghosts than in other Pac-Man games. Number 3, Sir Ghost. Now there are night ghosts that appear in the PC video game Pac-Man Adventures in Time. It's in one of the levels where Pac-Man's in like the Middle Ages or whatever. What I think is really interesting about the design of the Sir Ghost, which I'm calling him that, is that these night ghosts, are they from the same era that Sir Pax-a-Lot is from? In the monologue explained to us in Pac-Man World 2 by Professor Pac-Man, are these the same ghosts from that era that Sir Pax-a-Lot is from, where he defeated Spooky and had the great battle and everything? And what's really interesting about that is that Pac-Man Adventures in Time, the game, takes place, we can assume, before Pac-Man World 2? In the timeline of Pac-Man? Could it have been that Pac-Man actually went to the same time period that Sir Pax-a-Lot was from? It would have been cool if Pac-Man Adventures in Time as a game came out after Pac-Man World 2, and then what they could have done is when Pac-Man travels back to the medieval era, or whatever, he sees Sir Pax-a-Lot fighting Spooky, like in the background or something, like in one of the mazes, or a chance that where Pac-Man gets to talk to Sir Pax-a-Lot. That would be really cool. And speaking of Sir Pax-a-Lot, it'd be really cool if he got his own game. The final boss is Spooky and whatever. That would be an amazing concept for a Pac-Man game. And we should make a petition to make the Sir Pax-a-Lot game. So anyway, I'm calling these night ghosts, I guess you can call them night ghosts or Sir Ghosts, from the medieval era in Pac-Man Adventures in Time. Number 4, Mushroom Ghosts. There is a level in Pac-Man Adventures in Time where it's like a fungi level, and the ghosts have like mushrooms on their heads. So they're mushroom ghosts. Pac-Man is doing a maze like on a mushroom flower. And what I find the most interesting about this level, as opposed to all the other levels in the game, can we assume that Pac-Man has shrunken in size, and he's going through a maze, and he's really tiny? And all the ghosts, I don't know, like he got shrunk or something? Like all the ghosts shrunk or whatever? I'm not sure. Or does this take place in a different time period, possibly before the prehistoric era or around that era? Like all the occult theories about people coming coming from mushrooms and drugs and everything. It makes this level so much more fascinating because is this game, Pac-Man The Adventures in Time, with this level, is it trying to tell us that this was an era in time where mushroom people existed or mushroom ghosts somewhere in the past somehow? And I don't know. Maybe I'm thinking a little too deep into this. Maybe they were just like, oh, a mushroom level would be cool for Pac-Man Adventures in Time. I don't know, but even if I'm wrong about this theory, about the whole mushroom people thing, how do the mushroom ghosts exist? How could there be a ghost that's also a mushroom? I mean, I know this is like kind of a weird question to ask when talking about the ghost in Pac-Man. That's why I think the mushroom level in that game is the most fascinating level in the whole game, because it just makes you wonder, what is this supposed to be? Where are we in the timeline? It's not explained, really. But I also really love the design of the mushroom ghosts. They have a cool look to them. Wouldn't it be cool if they made Funko Pops of the mushroom ghosts? And like on the box it says it's from Pac-Man Adventures in Time. Remember that game from your childhood? Yeah. But I don't know. I think Namco ignores this game because Miss Pac-Man makes a cameo in one cutscene where she dances with Pac-Man or whatever on the disco floor. So I think that's why they never re-released Pac-Man The Adventures in Time. But it's, of course, like a lot of things I've mentioned in the other videos, it's an extreme shame because this is an excellent Pac-Man game that a lot of us got to play, but also a lot of us didn't get to play because it was only available on the PC. Man, that was the good old days where they had exclusive games for the computer and you were like the really cool kid if you got to have that. And back in the day with the slow-ass computers, even though we love how nostalgic they are now, back in the day they were so damn slow that you were lucky if you got to play it on those old computers, if you got it to work. Because sometimes it wouldn't work and it was a pain in the ass and everything was slow as a slug. Yeah, well, anyway, I know I went off on a little tangent there, but the 90s computers. I love Pac-Man The Adventures in Time, and there's so many ghosts from that game that I can just go on and on and on about it. But I always like to pick out the ones I find the most interesting and fascinating to talk about in a video. Like ghosts that people never thought about before or really never gave a shit about, or just ghosts that are underrated in the history of Pac-Man. And that's why I find the mushroom ghosts so interesting. Well, boys and girls, that's going to be it for part 6. I hope you all really liked this video. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you all real soon.